Hannibal throughout its first season seems to be a show at war with its own procedural format. By the second season, it almost completely bucks the format, except for a few episodes. In this episode, you can feel the writers struggling against the procedural format this show probably needed for its first season to latch onto more viewers before it became the show that Bryan Fuller wanted it to be. However, this episode shows when the Hannibal procedural episodes are at their best. They are at their best when the procedural storyline ties in with what is going on with the rest of the story, either directly or thematically. This episode, Procedural, does tie in with the rest of the episode's theme, the theme of connections. Amuse-Bouche, and again I'm sorry I don't know how to pronounce these names, Amuse-Bouche, opens with Will being haunted by Garrett Jacob Hobbs, to then go directly into Jack and Will investigating the Hobbs cabin. Immediately you are made aware that Garrett Jacob Hobbs and his daughter Abigail Hobbs are going to be important for the entire season. It is very rare for a procedural to pick up in the next episode with the team discussing the previous case and still investigating it. This opening shows that Hannibal is not going to be like any other procedural on TV. Jack brings up the idea that Abigail Hobbs helped her father commit these crimes in some way. Will almost immediately disregards it. Both of these characters are smart. There are a lot of times where the show may paint Jack into a corner of being strong-headed about his ideas, but he has those ideas because of how good he is at his job. And we already know that Will is good at his. Both of these smart men disagree with each other on Abigail. One of them is wrong. We get Jack's reason for believing that Abigail may have been involved. We do not get Will's reason. Yet. Now we get to meet Freddie Lounds. This episode, in a lot of ways, is mostly an episode to introduce her into the ensemble. Throughout Season 1, Freddie Lounds is a big part of the supporting cast and is a constant thorn in Will and Jack's side. Laura Jean Choritsetsky is fantastic in this role. Her sliminess and just joy in what she does is one of the great parts about episodes that she is in. She is one of those characters you are going to learn to love to hate. Will returns to the classroom to discuss not only Hobbs, but also the copycat. Yes, the copycat is also something that is going to matter throughout the season. Through this first act of this episode, the audience learns that the pilot was not just some one-off case, but it was in fact the building blocks for much of the story going forward. It is something I really appreciate in hindsight. Alana and Jack come in to talk to Will. Jack wants Will back in the field, regardless of whether or not Will wants to be back or not. In this scene, he does not even allow Will to answer Alana's question about whether or not he wants to return. Again, Alana is being Will's guardian, and Jack is being Will's boss. Will caught Garrett Jacob Hobbs. Without Will, they likely would not have caught him for some time, if at all. Jack knows that, and knows that there are more killers out there, and that Will is probably the only person that can catch them. Jack has requested a psych eval for Will with Hannibal.
I'm not going to be comfortable with anybody inside my head.
And now Will and Hannibal are tied to each other. Hannibal is supposed to be Will's psychiatrist, but immediately rubber stamps Will. Hannibal does not want a professional relationship with Will. He wants a friendship. He gets the paperwork out of the way so Will may feel more comfortable speaking with him. Their relationship is no longer a formal one. Hannibal brings up Will's obligation to Abigail Hobbs and even his own. It would be easy to dismiss Hannibal saying he feels obligated to Abigail as just something Hannibal said to bond with Will. I don't believe that's the case, though. Hannibal is obligated and attached to Abigail, just in a very different way. Now after the first 10 minutes of the episode, we are introduced to the case of the week, a killer who has been using bodies to create a mushroom farm. Few procedural shows would wait so long to introduce the episode's case. In fact, most shows start with something directly attached to it. I am reminded of Fringe, where each episode opens with something bizarre or scary happening, and then we got to go meet the team. Not with Hannibal, though. Hannibal spent its time picking up the pieces from the pilot before bothering to push forward with the episode's case. This is something I really appreciate about the show. The show's characters almost always come first. Then we get a fun scene with Beverly and Will. It is interesting here to note how Beverly does touch Will, and he does not seem too uncomfortable with it. While Beverly and will for sure establish a friendship throughout Season 1, I do wish it was a friendship that we had more time with. If only because Hugh Dancy and Hetine Park have such great chemistry with one another. Will does his thing at the crime scene, and we get to see how Freddie Lounds does her thing. Hobbs slips into Will's recreation of the crime scene, sending Will back to Hannibal. Hannibal being Will's lifeline is scary for us as an audience, since we know who Hannibal is. Multiple times throughout this episode, the show plays on what the audience knows and the characters don't. The show does this so well and does it so often. Each scene with Hannibal on screen carries the weight of the audience knowing who he is and what he is capable of, even though throughout this episode we see him commit no crime or any violence. Hannibal then touches on the theme of this episode, which is connections. Freddie Lounds is now in Hannibal's office. If you can call this an office, this place is gorgeous. Hannibal immediately figures out who she is, and I love the way that Freddie seems so pissed off that she was immediately found out. It does not seem like something that happens to her very often. Hannibal makes her delete the recording of his session with Will Graham, and then we get this scene.
You've been terribly rude, Miss Lounds. What's to be done about that?
The cut here is so deliciously dark. Jack is having dinner again, and we are presented with a scene where one of our characters is eating human. We are going to see our main characters eat a lot of people that they do not know they are eating, and Hannibal just loves it.
Well, next time, bring your wife. I'd love to have you both for dinner.
Will has a breakthrough with the case, leading them to a pharmacist. They save what would have been his next victim, but do not catch the killer because he was tipped off by Freddie Lounds. Yep, Freddie is still with us. Alana and Will are in a room alone together for the first time. You can definitely tell watching this scene that these two characters have chemistry. Alana is attracted to Will, and Will is attracted to Alana. They have this alone time while they are both trying to connect with Abigail Hobbs, even though she is still unconscious. It is this connection to Abigail that Will craves that leads Stamets to Abigail. Stamets abducts Abigail, hoping to put her into one of his new gardens, so Will can connect with her in a way that he cannot do so right now. Will catches him before he can get away. Stamets thought that Will would understand what he was doing. You really believe here that Stamets thought he was going to be helping Will. Freddie Lounds told him that Will understood him. For the first time, Stamets thought he would have found someone who understood him. Finally, we end the episode with another session between Hannibal and Will. This is such a great scene and sets up some of the manipulation Hannibal is going to be leaning into this season. He confronts Will with the notion that killing can feel good. Will even admits that he liked killing Garrett Jacob Hobbs. That is what then pushes Hannibal to the idea of God. If we are all made in his image, then he must like killing. When Will asks if God enjoys killing, Hannibal puts it simply.
You felt powerful.
The procedure of this week's episode is not in and of itself all an incredible one. While the Mushroom Party Farm is a striking image, the rest of the case is not all that interesting, which makes it interesting how the case influences our other characters. For instance, Freddie gets drawn into the line of fire when Stamets finds her and asks her about Will. It is Freddie's fault that Stamets not only finds her, but then almost kills Abigail Hobbs. Early on in the episode, Jack confronts Will about how many times he has visited Abigail Hobbs. Will does not answer this question because Will knows that he should not have been going there at all. And later in the episode, Jack calls Will and just assumes he is already at the hospital. Will killed Abigail's father and almost did not save her without Hannibal's help. It will not be the first person we see Will save in this series, but Abigail offers Will an opportunity he has never been presented with, to be a father, to be someone for Abigail that she no longer has. And the one that she did have wanted to murder her, so I would not say he was the world's greatest dad. Meanwhile, Hannibal is trying to connect with Will. By rubber stamping Will, Hannibal sets up the relationship as an unofficial one. And several times throughout this episode, Will goes back to Hannibal. Hannibal is a sounding board for Will that is safe for him. He can discuss things with Hannibal, and he feels that he will not be judged as he would with Jack or Alana. Hannibal has Will right where he wants him. With Will close, he can get closer to him and start to manipulate him, much like Hannibal has already begun to do so in this episode. He made Will confront the feeling he had that he liked killing Hobbs. Then Hannibal takes it one step further, saying that killing can feel good, and that killing is not necessarily a bad thing. Finally, we have the connection between Alana and Will. In the first episode, Alana and Will do not even share a scene together, but Alana states that she has never been alone with Will. She wants to be his friend, but being alone in a room with him would complicate that. We see how it might in this episode. They are in a room alone together, and without the eyes of anyone else on them, their attraction is very clear. A connection between the two of them could be formed, but Alana from the first episode seems to not want that, even though I believe Will is more open to the concept. Upon rewatch, I do believe this episode is a good one, but compared to what is about to come, it is a relatively weak episode of Hannibal. Through no fault of its own, really. There was so much going on in the pilot that this episode had to finish setting the table for the rest of the season. We needed to be introduced to Freddie Lounds. We needed to deal with the fallout from the Hobbs investigation. We needed to establish Will and Hannibal's relationship, and we needed to understand how important Abigail Hobbs is going to be moving forward. There was a lot of building in this episode for the Season 1 story arc to come. As was posted on my last video by someone, the fact that I am avoiding spoilers will make it harder to discuss certain episodes than it will others. I feel like this is oddly one of those episodes. There is so much building here and foreshadowing for what is to come that I still will not discuss. Yet, if you are watching this show for the first time, I want you to follow along with me through these videos. I don't want to ever spoil anything for you because nothing was spoiled for me, and to spoil anything would be a disservice to you. So I will be sticking with my no spoilers rule. For now, just know that in episodes down the line, we will probably discuss this episode a bit more. We are 2 episodes into Hannibal Season 1, and the show finally seems to be all set up for us. The characters have all had their time to shine and interact. We have gotten a glimpse at its wonderfully dark humor, and we have gotten to see how the procedural format will work, which is great, because the next episode drops the format completely. See you next time.
Welcome back.